Green there. So I just like to start with a little exercise before we get into my slides. And I want everyone to just pay attention to their breathing. And I'm going to give you about 30 seconds, and I want you to count your breath, if you will. So just pay attention when you inhale, when you exhale, don't change anything, and just count each breath you take, inhale and exhale. So we'll start now. And then we'll have stop. Everyone can stop. And I just want you to note the number that you came up with for 30 seconds, and you times it by 2. Will tell you how many breaths per minute you're breathing. So how many breaths per minute you're breathing. So it might be 20, 25, 15, 10. It could be all over the place. But just so you kind of know, because near the end of the presentation, we're going to be doing a little breathing exercise, and I want you to compare what the breathing rate was at the beginning. I don't want you to kind of change it if we did it at the end. Okay, so first I want to thank you for inviting me to speak. So I'll be talking about neurofeedback, because that's the research that I've done. And it's basically been done for stress management. So I'll be mostly talking about the stress response and that type of thing, which is obviously part of burnout, is that our stress response is activated there. Oh, my slides are not, give me a second. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we'll talk about, just quickly talk about burnout prevention, stress and the stress response, neurofeedback and biofeedback, and then just some tools at the end. So first of all, burnout, I won't actually go into that because that's already been presented. Mine's just the start of that definition, so we'll just move on from there, but we're all starting at the same place. So burnout prevention. So in order to prevent burnout, we need to do something every day. So it's not something that you do after, ideally. It's that you want to be thinking about that every day, about what you can do to, and in the case of what I'm going to be talking about, is to how to manage your nervous system optimally. So my focus is on bioneurofeedback and the nervous system and how we can manage that. Okay. So just first to talk about stress. So Kelly McGonigal, professor at Stanford, has written the book, The Upside of Stress. So she talks about what we need to do is get good at stress, not get rid of it. So we're always going to have stress. Our nervous system is always we're going to turn on that stress response. There's no way we can train or anything to not do that. So it's going to come on, but what we need to do is to notice it and do something about it. So we need to get good at it, not she talks about changing your mindset. She also has some nice TED Talks, so it's a good thing just to look at if you get a chance. So the real problem is that 7 out of 10 people live with the stress response on. So it's not that stress or the stress response is a bad thing, it's that they can't get it turned off. So we get to burnout because we can't get that stress response turned off. So the stress response triad, so when we turn on that stress response, the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system all are activated. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is specifically about how we can manage and be aware of and self-regulate our nervous system to help us deal with the stress response and with burnout. So this is just a diagram of the nervous system, and we all have a nervous system. So you'll see on the left, there's the central nervous system, and that is the brain and the spine. And so it's our brain, And there's also the peripheral nervous system, which is our body. So all the nerves run off of the spine into the body. So there's two different systems there, central and peripheral nervous systems. And within the peripheral nervous system, within the body, we have the somatic and the autonomic nervous system. And so the key one we're going to talk about today is this autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system. And so the sympathetic system is your stress response. So when you notice that you're activated, your sympathetic system has engaged. And the parasympathetic is the relaxation response. And what happens under stress and why people don't get it turned off, why they don't get the stress response turned off, is because the parasympathetic nervous system is not activated. And so the key is to do things that can activate that parasympathetic nervous system. And that turns off the stress response. And so we have to be aware of what can do that. And so why should you care about the nervous system, and the parasympathetic system, the sympathetic? You should, because the nervous system has a negativity bias. So all human nervous systems have this negativity bias. And it's the older part of our brain. So the brain can be broken down. One way you can break it down is you can call it the reptilian brain, the survival brain, mammalian brain, the feeling brain, and then the thinking brain, or the cortex. So we take our brain and we can break it down into three parts. And when that older part of the brain is activated and running the show, we are hardwired for negativity. So it's constantly scanning the environment for threats. And when it does this, the sympathetic nervous system is poised to activate. A part of our brain is always looking for a problem. And so, but we need to we override that with our neocortex, or our new brain, the newer part of our brain, our thinking brain. But there are times when basically it hijacks, and we need to be aware when that's happening and what can we do about it. So we've known this for a long time. So William James, a psychologist, he says the greatest thing is to make the nervous system our ally instead of our enemy. And so that was many years ago. So we know this, but we're not very good at it. We've known it for many years, but we're not necessarily good at getting that parasympathetic system back on. And in order to be your best, perform optimally, you have to develop self-awareness skills and self-regulation skills. So being aware of the present moment, staying in the present moment, being aware of what's going on, and then being able to change it if it's not optimal. So these are some athletes that I've worked with over the years, and all of them realize that this ability to self-regulate, this ability to manage your mental health is one of the key aspects in life. And I think mental health hasn't always got much attention. That's certainly changing now. But all of them would agree that, that when they compete, the top 10 people could easily win. And the person that actually wins is a person that is mentally the strongest and mentally the healthiest. It's not the physical necessarily. Now, the bio and neurofeedback, which I'm going to get into shortly, and what that is and how that helps you regulate your nervous system, it's based on the psychophysiological principle. And so what that psychophysiological principle is it says every change in your mental emotional state, conscious or unconscious, is accompanied by an appropriate change in your physiological state. So what's happening in your brain affects what's happening in your body. And conversely, what's happening in your physiological state, your body, is accompanied by a change. If that changes, it accompanies a mental emotional change. And so this is that the principle, is that we just have to go into that nervous system, and we want to try to make a change at one of the parts. So again, we're looking here, neurofeedback, we look at changing the brain waves, and biofeedback, we look at changing the body, the breathing, your breathing possibly, your sweating response, your muscle tension, your heart rate. And so by changing one, you can change the other. So that's like the theory behind it. And so it isn't that we have to change everything, but can we get in there and intervene with one simple thing? So neurofeedback is EEG, or electroencephalogram, brain waves. So we look at your brain waves. And we've known for many, many years that it's possible to learn to modulate your own brain activity. And so we can do that, but we're not very good at it. It's not something we've practiced or that we've had experience doing and being able to do very well. And also brain-wave frequency bands, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So the bands of the brain waves are associated with mental states. So this is just a diagram here. And this is like if we were to measure your brain waves, we had you hooked up, you have slow brain waves. So the red there is when you're in a mental state where you are, you're inwardly focused, you're maybe daydreaming. This is the state you're in before you go to sleep. So when if someone can't get to sleep very easily, they can't produce this red theta, these brain waves. So that's something they need to work on in order to go through that state. And what you want to be is you want to be able to be flexible. You want to be able to shift from one state to another. If there's something that's needs your attention, you need to be able to shift to that, let go of everything else, and then you can go back, to just kind of recovering after. The green is called the alpha state, and that is what when we are just aware of what's going on in our environment, present moment focus, kind of a broad awareness. We're not doing anything, we're not processing, but we're just aware. And that's where we'd like to live most of the time, because that's where we can recover and rejuvenate. So producing those alpha waves, you may have heard of that with yogis. They're very good at producing that. In mindfulness, that's what we're trying to do as well. Learn to kind of go to a place where you are not processing. And then the beta, the yellow, is when you're narrowly focused, when you're doing a task, and we want to be good at that as well. Being able to narrow our focus, get the job done, and then we want to go back to the green. So ideally through the day, we're going from yellow to green, back and forth, recovering, narrowly focusing, back and forth. And then the high end, the purple, is what we call high beta, which is when you have busy brain, when you're ruminating, when you're worrying, all that type of thing. And those are small, fast brain waves, and they use a lot of energy. So in 1 second, there would be between 20 and 30 of those brain waves. And that's like you're skipping rope. You're skipping rope, and you would have to skip 30 times, as opposed to in the green alpha, if you have 10 brain waves coming through, skipping 10 times, it takes a lot less energy. Okay. So in order to kind of perform our best and be at our best, we want to do that middle yellow and green and yellow, right? So we talked about one being unfocused daydreaming, the red ones, and then the green and yellow being a broad focus or narrow focus, and then the other one being ruminating or worrying. It's about being able to get back to that state, which is optimal for us. So this is what most people look like. So the other graph is where we would like your brain waves to look. And this is actually where most of us are. We have a ton of high beta, and we have less of the green than we'd like, for sure. Okay, that nice recovery, that nice state of being very present focused and very in the moment, and dealing with what's going on, not worrying about what went on before, and not worrying about what goes on in the future. And so that's what we would be trying to cultivate. Let's see, just a second here, something, just move things so I can see. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to increase those that are reduced and decrease those that are in excess. And then we'll move into talking about, so that was neurofeedback. That's when we look at the brain and what's happening in your brain. And you can probably, we can relate to back in the 60s, they did research that we know when we have busy brain. We know when we're in that alpha state. And we can do shifting, but it's like anything, it's a muscle, and we have to, in order to be good at it, we have to practice it. You want to be good at turning off the stress response, creating the alpha waves, being very present moment focused. You have to practice. Just like basketball, you need to practice. If you want to shoot baskets into the basketball hoop, you need to be practicing. And every day we're practicing. So whatever we're doing, you're always practicing something. So be noticing that. So now we'll shift into, that was neurofeedback, but we'll shift into biofeedback. And when we do biofeedback, we look at things like your respiration rate. So this is the body. This is the autonomic nervous system, the body, what's happening there. Under stress, the respiration rate increases. Our heart rate increases and our heart rate variability decreases. Our muscle tension increases. And our skin conductance increases. That's our sweating response. And the last thing we measure is we measure our peripheral body temperature. And so all of these things under stress, that's the direction they go. And if you were to have the relaxation response on, it would be opposite, obviously. And what you want to do is kind of identify of those responses, what type of stress responder are you? So do you notice whether your respiration rate increases? Do you notice your heart rate increases? Muscle tension, whether you're a sweater, whether your peripheral body temperature drops. So that would mean your hands would be cold. Your hands would get cold under stress. And you would notice if you put your hand to your neck, you could tell if your hand and your neck are the same temperature, you don't have the stress response on. If your hands are cooler, then the stress response is on in that system. And so you learn, or you become aware of how is it that I manifest stress, and then what can you do about that? Right. So the goal for biofeedback is the autonomic nervous system, so that sympathetic parasympathetic balance. So you see again the picture of the nervous system, and we'll come back to that a few times as we're talking. So we're now talking about the bottom part here. This autonomic nervous system, the body, the sympathetic system, the stress response, and the parasympathetic system, the relaxation response. And so this is really the key, and it's been the key in the last number of years in the research about how we can keep ourselves healthier, how we can be our best selves, all research, resilience and everything. It often talks about how can we engage that parasympathetic system. So it isn't that the stress response isn't going to go on, and it should go on, and it needs to go on to alert us of something, but we don't want it to go on indefinitely. We want to get that parasympathetic system back in the game, right? And there are ways you can do that, and obviously, a walk in nature, doing exercise, mindfulness, breathing exercises, and the list can go on. And for each person, it can be different. But how do you turn the sympathetic off and get that parasympathetic activated again? And that's what needs to be done first. If you notice you're stressful, it's not to deal with the problem. It's to get that parasympathetic nervous system activated. And we'll be talking a little bit later too. The reason you want to do that is the parasympathetic nervous system is linked with the prefrontal cortex. So that's the front of your brain, the part of your thinking brain. And we know that when we get stressed, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. In other words, your thinking brain, especially the front, the prefrontal cortex, thinking brain is, or the cortex is the whole brain at the top layer. But that thinking brain goes offline, and then you can't think, you can't make good decisions for whatever you're doing or for yourself. So we really have to get that parasympathetic nervous system back on, because it brings that thinking brain back there and you can make good decisions. So super important. And so when we're looking at biofeedback, when we're looking at the body and we're looking at how to decrease that sympathetic activation and increase that parasympathetic activation, we're looking at doing breathing at approximately 6 breaths a minute. It can be up to 9 or 10. And I'm putting this number there, but it isn't, you don't have to dead do that. It is more where you start and where we would bring you to for breathing. But breathing at that rate, we know activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And then heart rate variability greater than 20 beats. We won't get into the details of that, but heart rate variability is your heart rate varies at all times. So we might say, oh, my heart rate is at 70, but it's really not. It varies. It's always going faster and slower continuously. And we notice with heart rate variability that when people have high heart rate variability, so it goes from maybe 60 to 80 up and down, we know that's a healthy system. It's a flexible system. But when we're stressed, our heart rate variability decreases. And when you're very sick, your heart rate variability decreases. So that nervous system isn't healthy. So we need to get that heart rate variability up. Muscle tension, that's another thing that we notice shoulder tension, back tension, all of those things. And I mean, it can even be as simple as bringing your awareness to that area, and just as you exhale, relaxing that area and letting the muscle tension out. So you want to be identifying what type of stress responder you are, and you also want to have things you can do. And as soon as you notice, you have awareness of it, you want to do something, you want to regulate it, you want to do something about that. Skin conductance is sweating response. So that's something that as we increase parasympathetic activation, our skin conductance measures come down. And then the peripheral body temperature, when we are stressed, we don't send blood to the hands. We keep it in the body in case we need to run out of here, And so we shut off the flow to the hands. And so if you just even are sitting there and you're doing some breathing and you allow your hands to be heavy. So if you're someone who is a temperature responder, I'm a temperature responder. As soon as I'm a little bit stressed, my hands are cold. And so I know I can just do a little bit of breathing, relax my arms, and let the blood flow back to the hands, can help just activate that parasympathetic system. So one of the most powerful ways that we can learn to manage that parasympathetic system with all the training. So we looked at, doing the brain training and doing the different types of training of the body. The most powerful one is doing heart rate variability biofeedback training. And this can help us. We always have our breath with us. We always have our breathing with us. We don't need any special equipment. So we bring our breathing and our heart rate into synchronization. And what that looks like is it looks like this. So if we had you hooked up, if I had a sensor on your thumb to get your heart rate, and I had a belt around your abdomen to get your breathing rate, if you were breathing at your resonant frequency, as you inhale, you see the blue line go up, and as you inhale, the heart rate would go up, and then it would come down as you exhale. So this is what we call cardiopulmonary resonance. So the heart and the lungs are kind of synchronizing, and that sends a very strong message to the rest of the body: chill, it's all good, we don't need to be stressed. And so that's what you want to be doing, and you want to be able to do that over the day. You want to be able to just send the message to your body: we got this, it's okay. And then you can quiet down your brain so you can think, and you can kind of calm down your body as well, so you're not burning up energy and not becoming exhausted. So this is just some research which I alluded to earlier, but it's about this heart rate variability and the importance of that measure. We know that, as I mentioned before, that the prefrontal cortex becomes hypoactive and goes offline as soon as we become stressed. So we know that happens. And when we breathe at a resonant frequency, we breathe around 7 breaths a minute. And we're going to be practicing that in a minute. This helps bring that parasympathetic nervous system and your thinking brain back online. So it's like you're always caring for yourself. And what this also does is when you bring your awareness to your breath, you're breathing, slowing that slow breathing, you can pay attention, you control your emotions, and you have behavioral flexibility, because that's what goes out the window as soon as we're stressed. Okay, so if everyone has their phones there, I'd like you to download the Breathe Easy app as an exercise. So it's the blue circle, and it's both on the Android and the iPhone. Just give you a minute. And once you get it opened, it should look like this. It can be a different shape or a different color, but that's kind of what the screen's going to look like for you. Can someone just give me a sign if they've got it downloaded, if we think, okay, think it's downloaded, okay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead if anyone can let us know if they're not ready. So this is just what the app looks like. And the first thing I'm going to have you do is go down to the right bottom corner where it says I to do the information. And what you should see is all the words come on to tell you what's there. So shape, background, color, breathe out, timing, and info. Okay. So that's just if you forget what it is. So what the breathe out is when the whatever shape it is big, you're going to then breathe out. And then when it's small, you're going to breathe back in again. And if you start it, you can kind of see that. That's what it is. So the top we will go to next will be shape. So go to the top left corner to shape, and pick a shape, pick whatever shape you want. So a triangle, a square, a circle, or a heart. Once you have your shape, I want you to go to the top and do background. And so background, you will either see at night, sometimes it's nice to have a dark background, not a bright one. And then through the day, it could be light, but you can decide which you like. So decide on that. And then color is in the right top corner. So go in there, there's about 13 colors. So you can go through the colors and decide on which color. Okay. And then after that, I want you to go to the bottom left, which is timing. There, and you'll see this will come up. And I want you to put in 4 seconds of an inhale time and 6 seconds for an exhale time. And then you can save it, and then you can go to doing that and just practice a few breaths for me here. And so what we really are focusing on is we want an exhale that's longer than the inhale. So when you inhale, you activate your sympathetic system. When you exhale, you activate your parasympathetic system. So no matter what is the timing, whether you do 5 and 7, if you find it a little bit too fast, then go in and change it to 5 and 7 rather than 4 and 6. And I want you to really feel like when you're inhaling, your belly is rising, and when you're exhaling, the belly is falling. So we're not breathing in our chest, we're breathing in our belly. And if it is comfortable for you, you should feel that the relaxation response kind of engaged. And so also the other thing I want you to kind of note is noting whether or not what was the breath rate per minute that you were breathing when we first started the class. And then if we're breathing, then notice the difference you feel like when we're breathing at about 6 breaths a minute. So this is 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out is about 10 seconds of breath. And so that's six breaths a minute. So you might have been breathing, and we breathe between 14 and 16 breaths a minute on average when we're just busy doing things, right? So when we're busy doing things, 14 to 16, if you're up into the 20s, that's a little bit faster, but for some people that's okay. But the average person breathes about 14 to 16 breaths a minute. And but bringing it back to 6, even up to 10, 9, 10, you're slowing it down, right? So whatever works for you, wherever you can just slow it down and do abdominal breathing, you can activate that parasympathetic system, and you can quiet your nervous system, and you can get the thinking brain back online. So this is what we found of all of our research had the best bang for the buck. It was the quickest way people can manage that nervous system. And so it's a tool you can use at any moment, at any day, while you're talking to someone, you're having a difficult conversation. And there's another, also you want to be practicing things that activate that parasympathetic nervous system every single day. So you want to do that in order to keep the stress response, to turn that stress response off and have the relaxation, the rebuilding response on. And that's what's going to kind of keep us healthy long-term, is us to be noticing and doing it, practicing it every day. So when we get into a difficult situation, we can notice we're activated and have some tools to bring it back. And if we don't practice it, we won't, under stress, we won't even think about that. We won't even think about doing that. Okay, so I actually will just move on here a little bit. I did have another breathing thing to tell you about, but I'll skip through it. I'll just go through it quickly. It'll be in my presentation. So it's actually a computer app, and I have it on my own computer, but you can't see it. I was hoping you would be able to see it. It's called David Breathe, and it's from Mind Alive. And this is what it looks like. And of course, the cloud gets bigger and smaller as well. You'll see at the top, there's the first one we don't use, the glasses, but the second one is the settings, then information, and then making it big. So I'm just going to show you kind of, this is the different things you can, different pictures you can have. This is when you look for the info, this is the info page that comes up when you touch that, David Breathe. And then you do the settings, and you can set the settings as well at 4 and 6, but it can vary a little bit. You can, if you would like, some people like to inhale and hold. You can set it to hold for 1 second, and they hold on the exhale, especially on the exhale. It's nice sometimes to hold, but that's just one you can put on your computer. I just have it in the corner bottom of my computer, and this is what it looks like when you inhale. It's full, and then to exhale, it's away, similar to the other one. Okay. As I mentioned, in order to prevent burnout, we need to be doing something every day. And I want people to just think for a minute, and it doesn't have to be in relation to, because, you know, what I talked about is more about the self-care part, but there's also like you need the system to be as well, the organizational system to be helping you. So that could be as well. But I want you to think of something that you will do, that you will commit to doing, that would help you to activate that parasympathetic nervous system, and in essence, to prevent burnout every single day. So it could be, so I just want everyone to think about that. I want you to decide, it can be tiny, tiny, small, and just make a commitment to doing that, just to take care of yourself. I know there's something else I had wanted to mention. This is a little out of context, but when we're working with people to perform optimally, you want to have awareness on your internal state, and that's what obviously the bio-neural feedback is. But you don't want to give all of your awareness away to the external world and be worrying about what's going on there. You want to keep some inside. You want 20%, 20% of your awareness is, how am I doing? What do I need? Do I need a drink? Do I need to go to the bathroom? What's my breathing like? If you're a muscle stress responder, are my shoulders up? Just have awareness and keep to 20% awareness on how you're doing. The external world will be there, the problem will keep coming. They're not going away, but you really want to, care for the self. Okay, that's it. And any questions? What do you think? Does anyone have any questions or any comments or thoughts?
I can jump in with a comment. I'm just looking to see if anybody's hand is up. I can't see it on my screen, the whole thing, but when you remind yourself to recenter with your breath and reground, the storm outside of you can keep raging, but if you keep coming back to, you're the sun, and the sun
peace or calm or whatever. And it's not, we don't learn that as kids. We don't, it isn't really part of life. And that it is the truth that we have that control. But so we really need to work on it. It's a muscle, and it's not a strong muscle in most of us, but it is a muscle. And the only way you're going to get better at it is by practicing. And it isn't even like, it doesn't have to be the breathing, but it has to be something that helps you something that helps you go back to,
absolutely. And it's kind of like, it's it's counterintuitive because when you're in the midst of, like, most of our members are running events or, festivals, and you're in that state, especially in the cycle of event management. So you're getting ready to launch your event and then you're managing your event. If somebody comes along and says, did you remember to breathe? It can be super annoying at first, be like, I don't have time to breathe. But the irony is, if you don't take the minute, even just looking at that really handy app and just taking a minute to breathe and reset your nervous system and calm back down, that's the trick. The trick to preventing burnout is remembering that even though it feels counterintuitive or feels like a waste of time, or you don't possibly have time to do that, you have to come back to, if I don't do this, I could suffer consequences down the road. So I have to do this in this moment,
For sure. And I mean, I love the idea of the parasympathetic. If we don't activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the sympathetic just goes on. Like, people live in chronic stress, and you are going to just, that sympathetic is not going to shut down. The parasympathetic has to activate, right? I mean, it is sympathetic going to, but you're going to crash. But so it's like, how can we get that parasympathetic nervous system on? And just thinking, get that guy back in the game. And I mean, I love the idea that it activates your thinking brain, and like, it's both of them go offline if you're too stressed, and it's like, okay, well, we can do something about this, and we got to get this guy back online. And actually, there was one other body of research that I didn't weave into here, which is my favorite body of research, which I think is important as well. So it's and I was going to weave it in, and then I forgot. But so it's from Barbara Fredrickson, and she's at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and she does research on the positivity ratio. And so, the idea of keeping it positive, no matter what, if we can just see that glass as half full. So she did research, and it is that if you need a 3-to-1 ratio of positive to negative in order to flourish. So if you have less than that, you are what she calls languishing. So you're either spiraling up or you're spiraling down. And so, this, and I loved it, and I love that, you need to kind of pay attention to all your interactions, and positive, negative. And what I thought was very interesting is her research with couples with, and so that is, you want to have the people who have the most, the relationships that flourish have a 6-to-1 positive to negative ratio. I mean, I just thought, oh, wow. And the ones that are not doing well, getting divorced and it's not going well, 1-to-1, 2-to-1. So it's just very interesting. And then another area she looked at teams, so business teams, and they're working together and their interactions, and she coded their interactions, whether it was positive or negative. And it is in order to have business teams that flourish, it has to be a 5-to-1 positive to negative ratio.
So interesting.
Flourish. Obviously, at 3-to-1, it is probably going to hold its own and be okay. But if the ones that really excel really have that, and they're just able to let go of something happens, it's a mistake, you just let it go, and you just see that glass. And I just love her research, just kind of like some more, the idea that we really do have to let it go.
Yeah, I love that. If you think of it, if you think of the link, send it to me and I'll make sure to put it in our resource hub for our mentors. And that's a great segue, actually, and thank you so much for that information. That was just really, really, really helpful. And so I'd like to introduce Theresa Smith from Exchange Works, because she comes at the mental health piece and support from a team standpoint, and working from an HR standpoint and management and employees. So over to you, Theresa.
Hi, Margaret, just a quick thing. I was stressed because my earphones weren't working and it was so loud with people working outside. And I'm like, so real time stress. I was like, oh, my hands are cold. and my heart rate is up. So it was very fascinating as you were going through. I was like, I feel it. So thank you for that. Okay, I'll get into, let me know if you can see my screen. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Not yet. Do I have to go?
do you have a double screens or are you just working with one screen?
Just one.
Just one, and you're using the share at the bottom?
Wait, just one sec. Yeah. Okay, got it. Great. Sorry about that, guys. There's a moment. Share. There's no share at the bottom for me. Oh yeah,
Zoom
got
is
it.
got it. There.
Yeah. Okay.
Going from the different applications. I'm in, Teams most of the day and then Zoom and can never find where the buttons are.
So let me know. I'm gonna do. Can you see that there?
Not quite yet. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. And can you still see the slides as I'm like as it is? Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I appreciate it. All right, so I'm Theresa Smith. I'm the founder of Exchange Works. Thanks for having me. So I help teams unlock solutions within, whether that's through coaching individuals or redesigning the experience of work together through employee experience design or EX design. So what I've found in both coaching and employee experience design is this. We often accept certain struggles. So burnout, constant stress, disconnection, as if they're just the cost of doing business. We stop questioning them and we tell ourselves, this is just the way that it is. But what if it's not? What if burnout isn't something we have to manage or push through? What if it's something we can design against? And that's what I want to talk about today. So, how can we challenge burnout, not just individually, but as a team, and how EX design offers a way forward? So as I mentioned at Exchange Works, I have two core services. There's the coaching for individuals and EX design for teams. Both are rooted in the same belief. The answers are already within you, whether you're one person or a team. And so let's start with coaching. If you've ever experienced coaching, you know how powerful it can be to bring awareness, just what Margaret was saying, that awareness and to see what's no longer working for you, to get clarity on how you want to move forward, how you want to work, want to live and lead differently. And coaching helps people to see the invisible causes of burnout, not just the workload, but the mindset, the habits, and the beliefs. And then they begin to make different choices. And as powerful as that is, sometimes you're still swimming upstream in a culture or a team that hasn't changed. So that's where EX design can come in. EX design helps teams collectively look at what's causing burnout. So together you're building awareness. You know, what's draining us? What have we normalized that we actually don't want anymore? And you know, what could we shift together? So it's not just about solving problems, it's about choosing how you want to work and support each other moving forward. So EX design supports burnout prevention because it listens deeply. So it's creating that space for people to name what's really draining them. Okay, it maps the reality, making the invisible visible through tools like journey mapping or co-reflection, and it's co-designing change. It's not that the team isn't being fixed, they're designing the fix. And it's testing, not guessing. We try small changes together and we see what sticks. And probably the most important is shifting mindsets from that passive endurance to active ownership. So I want to give you an example of why like the team-based change matters. So I once worked for a leader who, you know, amazing leader, constantly told us don't work overtime, protect your balance. It was kind of like her motto, protect your balance, that life work balance. But she always worked on like always online, late night emails, weekend updates. And even though the words said boundaries to us, the action said keep up. And I was working on that, doing that personal work, setting up the boundaries. I knew what I needed, but it was still hard to live that out in a system that didn't support it. And so that's why EX design can be a game changer. It gives the whole team the opportunity to say, this isn't how we want to work anymore. And then you co-create something better. So I want to show you a simple but powerful method and how we do that. So this is the double diamond method. It's a design thinking method we use in EX design. It's a flexible 4-phase process that helps us move from problem to possibility. So you'll notice there's the 2 diamonds here. So there's the one for exploring the problem and one for exploring solutions. So each diamond has 2 modes of thinking. You have the flare thinking, where we expand our thinking, gathering insights, surface what's really going on. And that happens in the discover and the design phases. Then you have the focus thinking, where we narrow in, make sense of what we found, and take aligned action. And that's in the define and deliver. Now, this approach is built in, again, deep listening, trust, collaboration. It strengthens problem solving through new mindsets, fresh insights from within the team. And it's like a muscle, just like Margaret was saying, it's like a muscle. It gets stronger with practice, both in big projects and everyday moments. And it may feel slower at start, but it saves time and energy in the long term, because instead of guessing at solutions, we actually understand what's needed. And because the team is co-designing the change, you spend less time trying to convince people to adopt it. They're already on board because they built it. So I want to tell you kind of how, a story of how this has been used. I was part of a team that we planned many events for employees. We were part of a big, large-scale IT company. We were a small but mighty team, and we wrapped up one of our biggest events of the year. And everyone felt exhausted, a little resentful, a little burnt out. I'm not sure if you felt that sometimes after events or projects, and so we asked ourselves as a team, like, what if we didn't want to wait till after the event to talk about it? What if we built awareness as we went? So that was our discovery phase. We committed to agree to each keep quiet notes during the planning and execution, because we knew we didn't have time after, and it was super fresh, and we all kept like honest notes because we were living through it. So it was just little observations about what was working and what wasn't. And we used a simple framework. I'm not sure if anyone knows this framework, but it's the stop, continue, start. So when you're working on something, so we all took individually or team-based, and we were like, what do we want to stop doing? So this is how we did our notes. What do we want to stop doing? What do we want to continue? And what could we start doing? And we brought all those notes together at our post-event debrief. And we shared it, and it was clear what the themes were for us. Communication had broken down for us. No one fully owned certain parts of the process. And we also had competing priorities from other projects that were constantly shifting our event timeline and focus. So a lot of competing priorities. And these are the type of challenges that can cause burnout with the team. So we asked ourselves a really great question. What are the things we just accept as the way that it is? And we made a long list. It wasn't too long, but it was a long list. And then we started to challenge that list. Like, what makes it the way that it is, and what could we choose to change? And then that naturally brought us to the define phase of EX design, of the double diamond. And from all the pain points we asked which of these is causing the most burnout right now. And we didn't try to fix everything. We picked one challenge we could focus on as a team. And that's when we moved into crafting our EX design brief. So you'll see here, this is a tool that frames the work ahead with one question, okay? You work as a team, so how might we blank so that blank. And you try to fill this in. And it sounds simple, but this is where the real alignment happens, because to fill in those blanks, we had to be specific. We had to challenge each other's wording to make sure we were aligned in what we meant with our words. And as we started to fill it out, we realized from all those themes that have popped out, the biggest challenge we wanted to face as a team was that it was that no one fully owned certain parts of the process. And so when we started to get clarity on that, the questions came up, like, what exactly are we trying to design? What do we mean by owned? What outcome do we actually want? And every time we challenge a word, it's like an onion. You're lifting the layers, you're pulling apart, and then so other questions come up as you're exploring, because this is it's part of still defining as a bit of discovery. It's like, what does clarity mean to each of us? After, are we designing for better communication or less duplication with our work? Is the goal fewer meetings or better ones? It really got granular, because as you start asking these questions, you're exploring. And through that conversation, we sharpened our focus and landed on something that felt right for our team. And our design brief became this: how might we create shared ownership of tasks so that no one feels overloaded or in the dark? And it was pretty cool, because in the dark was added at the end. But we had all felt that. We all experienced feeling in the dark. So it aligned, it was a visual for all of us that we could connect on. And we felt it. So it really became our team EX design brief. And that question became our compass. And so it got us into the design phase. We brainstormed small and realistic ideas. We started thinking of a shared planning board for upcoming deliverables. And then we also have defining roles for each event stage. You've all been part of the event plans. Events are a living, breathing thing. We always had defined rules for overall, but there's a lot of phases in events. So we defined actually for each phase of the event, and that was a big impact. We did weekly 15-minute check-ins just to align on priorities. We usually had that check-in with our main team meeting, but because we had the competing priorities, we took it aside and did a separate meeting just for the event. And we didn't do a huge overhaul. We just needed clarity, ownership, and small rituals that made it easier for our team to breathe. And so we finally went into the deliver phase, and it was about testing it. It's not permanent. It wasn't perfect. It was a pilot for the next initiative. And we did gut checks. And this is part of the testing. We were asking ourselves as we were implementing, do we feel more supported with this? Like, did stress decrease? I'll be asking, like, are my hands more warmer if I'm ever implementing this? And were we better aligned? And the answer was yes. And it wasn't perfect, but it was better. We felt the forward momentum. And more importantly, it was ours. We designed it together, we tested it together, and we owned it. And that's the power of EX design, taking that approach. It's commitment with each other that this is not the way we want it to be. And it's not giving a template. It gives you the space, the tools, and trust with each other to build something that fits for your team. And small teams are perfect for this kind of work. I'm sure all of you are small teams. And the reason is because you're agile. You can try something without jumping through 10 layers of approval. I don't know if you've experienced that, but it's the worst, going through all those layers. Small teams don't have to deal with that. Every voice truly matters, so engagement happens fast. Also, a single ripple can just transform the whole culture of your team. And it doesn't take a massive transformation to prevent burnout in a small team. It takes attention, intention, and the willingness to design something better together, choosing that this is not what you want. So before I wrap up, I wanted to leave you with a challenge or maybe an invitation. I'll say more of an invitation. That what if you tried with your teams, leaving here, one thing our small team did? You know, you don't need to do a big transformation to begin, just a moment of intention. Like, you can keep in mind the phases of the double diamond, but trying, jumping into discovery, trying the define. And you can do that with the three simple ways to start. So try, if you haven't ever done this, the stop, continue, start really helps you create awareness. So whether it's it really helped our team to do it in real time. Whether, jotting down what's draining you, what's supporting you, and what you would do differently next time. Let's say if you work in an office together, having a big board with stop, continue, start, and everyone adds it as they go. Also, the great question of asking out loud is that, what have we accepted as just the way that it is? It's really effective when you sit with a team and ask that question, and you make that list and you choose one thing to challenge together. And then try the design brief. If you do that discovery and you do that stuff, fill that out with your team. How might we blank so that blank? And you want to pay attention to how people interpret their words differently, because it's not a problem. It's an insight when you're going through it. And these small steps are more than exercises. They're mindset shifts. They move us from reacting to burnout to designing a better way, because EX design isn't about fixing burnout after it happens. It's about preventing it by proactively shaping how we work, relate, and support each other. And EX design doesn't have to be a solo struggle. Sometimes we feel that. So this is a way to face it together before it takes hold of the team and you. And so it's replacing that's just the way that it is with, what do we want this to be instead? What kind of experience do we want to create together? And that's what EX design offers. It's that. And so this is an invitation I'll leave with you just to wrap up. Be the team that chooses another way. Design a different experience together. Okay. So good luck as you do it and you practice it. And thank you so much for your time and learning about a little bit about EX design. And if anything has sparked something for you, I'd love to hear it, or answer any questions. Just connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn, or my information's there. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Theresa. Really love this. And just to clarify for people, if they haven't heard what EX design is, so you have Exchange Works, which is your service company, but EX design, they can find information about that process pretty much anywhere, right? And that's like an evolved type of HR approach.
Yeah, it's employee experience design. I did my certification with a company called Excellent in New Zealand. That owner, Sam, she's a real forefront. She's worked with a lot of tech companies she did an EX design manifesto. So she's someone definitely to follow. Yeah, and check out, I'll share my slides and you'll see the credit from Excellent. They're an awesome company. When you hear it, it's simple. We all know it fundamentally. And when you talk to people, this is all fundamentally what we all know, but for some reason we don't do it. So it's working with the team to break it down in phase approach and challenge ourselves and build that awareness. So yeah, it's very new, the concept of EX design, but we all fundamentally know it. It's just doing it and kind of taking that leap together, for sure.
Exactly. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And thank you for how you tied it into the experience of teams to prevent burnout. Because if you do implement, it seems to me, if we implement some of these changes or approaches, there's some real concrete ways that you can reduce the stress in an environment to increase the chances of wellness.
Yeah, because when you can work, it's great, the individual work you can do for yourself. And of course, always individual first. But when you bring your team together, it's that commitment that we no longer want to do this anymore. And that can be quite powerful because, again, you do all the work, but you're swimming upstream. So it can be harder. It can be harder for you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Theresa. So, okay, and to bring us around, the final piece of our call today, I'd like to introduce Catherine Harrison from Revelios. And I just love how this is going because Margaret got us to focus on the inside, internally aligned with ourselves, and Theresa brought us a little bit out to the team. And Catherine's going to talk about the team, but also how to provide environments for your programming and people that you're bringing in and support them in their wellness. Go ahead, Catherine.
Hi, can you guys see my slide? Yay, and I'm going to open up a chat here. As you can see, I've put throw questions in the chat. I've got the chat open. I kind of use it as a virtual flip chart or whatever. So as I'm talking, if you want to add stuff in, I'm going to keep a notice on that as well. This is terrific. We're rounding out the home stretch, and when I was listening to the conversation from both Margaret and Theresa too, what I heard was very common themes of awareness, agency, accountability, collaboration, community, tools, tips, all of these very actionable things. So we're going to keep that going in the last 15 minutes. Just a little bit of street cred for me. I work both as a musician still, but also as a researcher and a consultant in the space around creating psychologically safe workplaces, developing human-centered leadership, and I specialize in the creative industries as well as the life sciences. So that's what I do. And we've talked a lot about this already, but it's an important thing to recognize. And I want to thank Margaret for calling this out earlier, which is like stress is not a bad thing. We talk about stress and we often assume we mean negative stress, but stress is something that we have in the system. It keeps us alive. Negative stress, or the stress that leads us to burnout, of course, is the kind where there's no resolution. There's no sort of catching your breath, right? So I always use this symbol of a heartbeat because there is actually stress in the system, but then there's a recovery. And then there's stress in the system, but then there's a recovery. And when we don't have any recovery, when we don't have any rest, when we don't have any resolution, this is where we have this unhealthy stress that we've talked at length about physiologically, neurobiologically, even I would say, collectively, Theresa, in teams and things like that. And many of you may have seen this before, but we need a certain level of pressure or tension or stress in the system for us to actually perform optimally. And most individuals who work in this space are drawn to the festival space, are drawn to these environments because it is so fast moving and very exciting, and everything changes. And so we have to recognize that it's sort of like what do they say, you're the poison and the cure or something like that, but like we love part of it, but it can also be the thing that tips us over the edge. So again, back to awareness, which we've been doing for the last hour, is talking about how do we get more familiar and more aware of when we are moving beyond leveraging that good stress to optimize performance, and we're flirting with disaster, and that we're getting into the strain, we're getting into the imbalance, we're getting into the overwhelm and burnout. I will just bring one piece of data from the current research that I'm doing, the first national Canadian study looking at mental health in our music industry. We launched it in September, and so far of the 1,100 respondents, almost everyone says that mental health issues are widespread in our industry. So if you are feeling stressed or burned out or overwhelmed or just like, whoa, you are not alone. This is not just artists. This is any Canadian music industry worker, including individuals like yourself and the artists and the crew and the people with whom you work. And so this conversation is actually a very critical piece to solving this widespread and chronic challenge. Because one of the other things that comes up is that as much as we talk a lot about mental health right now, and there's a lot of A-listers who post things about mental health, there's actually still a lot of stigma about raising your hand and seeking mental health support. So this is a really critical piece. Talking candidly, as Tara did, and openly, and having these kind of forums is one of the best ways that we can normalize the conversation and reduce that stigma. One of the things, I'll throw another tip and tool into this conversation. is to, and Margaret talked about this a lot, is the connection between the mind and the body and how we can notice some of our physiological responses to our psychological or mental stressors and vice versa. And sometimes we need to ensure that we're giving our organism a fighting chance to be able to actually navigate this, highly dynamic, highly charged, stressful environment. And so one of the things that we can get aware of is, checking in on our basic human needs, some basic physiological, biological, psychological, and social needs. And one of the acronyms that we use, and we took this, the first part of it from the recovery community, which has been using HALT for many, many, many years, because they know that it's a lot more challenging to stay in a healthy relationship with substances or other addictive experiences if you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And so we feel that the same thing applies when we're trying to optimize our performance and our well-being in highly dynamic and stressful environments. So we've just added a couple of extra ones to check in on, which is, have I moved, which is a very natural and normal human need, which is to move this body, and have I been outside? Have I connected in any way with, the natural world? So these are just things to be thoughtful about as protective factors. We often talk about what are the risk factors, but we often don't think about what are the protective factors for our health and our mental health and psychological health. And so some of these things are important to think about for yourselves, but also for the artists and crew who are coming into your spaces, is how might you be able to set environments in place that can at least aspirationally ensure that people have the opportunity to meet some of these basic needs. I mentioned earlier how thrilled I was that we were already talking so much about awareness and agency and connection and community. This is sort of my take on, how do we set psychologically safe work environments, is the ABCs. And it goes something like this: awareness, agency, accountability, adaptability, balance, belief, belonging, boundaries. And then I have a whole suite of C's. I could do a whole presentation on the C's because it includes also things like curiosity and consistency and consequences and a whole bunch. But for our purposes today, let's unpack a couple of these. I have a QR code here too. If you're interested in reading a little blog I did on the ABCs, feel free to check that out and use that as a tool afterwards. But really, as we've started to already talk about earlier today, it's really first and foremost, awareness is about staying attuned to your thoughts, feelings, and triggers. It's about increasing your sense of literacy and knowledge, like you're doing here today. You're learning things and you're talking about things, and hopefully you're taking things away that you can apply. Agency is about, if I know something, what can I do about it? How can I take ownership of choices and prioritize self-care? And then accountability is, what will I do? And how will I hold myself accountable for maintaining some of these healthy habits? And like we talked earlier, like pick the one thing that you're going to do regularly as a protective factor to set yourself up for success. When we talk about, human well-being, balance is everything. We both have human needs to belong, but we also, for health, need to set healthy boundaries in place. Because if there's too much belonging, we often do everything for everyone else but ourselves. And in fact, Tara, when you were reading that list of like, how do we know we're cruising towards burnout? Some of that was, I'm just doing everything for everybody. I don't feel like I have any sort of control over my own space. So finding that balance, taking some of these learnings, certainly cultivating a supportive network for emotional well-being. We are wired for connection. We have to get thoughtful about who we allow in our sacred spaces, and really be thoughtful about how we can optimize those communities for well-being and minimize any sort of negative or consistently draining relationships, and to set clear limits with everyone in your life, actually, that does not push people away so that we, get too far away from belonging, but that we start to recognize that it is not selfish to be selfish, right? Like the only people who are going to help prevent burnout is ourselves. And so we have to be very thoughtful about that. And then curiosity, courage, and collaboration, as we've been talking about today. Let's get curious. Let's ask questions. Let's actively listen. Let's engage. Let's consider new ways of working that perhaps we haven't before. Let's explore how rigid and tethered to some of our ideas and ways of working that, even though we know it's not working, we're still kind of reticent to explore some of the things Theresa just talked about. So that curiosity and courage and collaboration are critical as well. So here's a couple of just tips and tools to sort of animate and activate this. One is to do, kind of building on what we did at the top of the exercise around some of our breath work. You can also do a super quick and dirty, mental health check-in anytime using a scale from 1 to 10. And doesn't have to be super researchy. You just go 1 is terrible, 10 is great. And you can make a list of these things. You can take a screenshot of this if you want, of like, I'm just going to rate myself on mood, thinking, attitude, performance, like that performance curve we talked about. So it doesn't mean you're up playing the guitar. It just means like the things I need to do as part of my job or life. Am I able to do those things? Social connections, sleep, movement, appetite, nutrition, substance use or other addictive behaviors, smartphone, social media. The horse has left the barn on whether, too much smartphone or social media use is good for our mental health. It's not. So you can use this as less than 60 seconds at any point. You can check in with yourself. And I did a little, this is mine from yesterday. So you could do a really quick check-in at any point, just so I'm feeling a little, I've got those physiological markers. I'm sweating, my hands are cold. I'm breathing, shallow breathing. How am I feeling about some of these things? And of course, you could make a different list for some of the things that are, of yourself are really critical to your optimal well-being. And then just spend another couple of seconds noticing what the data are telling you. And then say to yourself, okay, what one aspect, if I moved it up by just a point or two, would positively impact my well-being? And then, of course, we have to couple that with agency and accountability. So, okay, let's say I got a little more sleep. How might that impact the other aspects? What could I do to just move it? Because the last thing we want to do is say, we need to be 10 out of 10 on everything. That goes to like the number one thing about burnout is like, I have to, do the best and I have to, like, there's no wiggle room. So we just want to be thoughtful, as Theresa said, like, it's just about making small shifts. And then hold yourself or your teammates or your partners accountable in terms of like, okay, what do you need to be able to do that? When will you do it by? How will you measure it? What boundaries might you need to set in place in order for you to accomplish it? And then think about what's in it for you. So what might you gain by making this decision to make a small shift in some behavioral choices that ultimately might make a bigger shift in your mental health and well-being. And of course, you could use these same things in collaboration with everything else we've been talking about today. And in terms of like, how are we going to set psychological safety in our festivals and with our clients and with our peers, etc. And so let's talk about how might you begin, because again, this is not like a full week's forum exploring how we can do this, but how might you begin creating psychologically safe spaces for artists or crew or anyone else who might be in your ecosystem? First thing is to normalize mental health conversations like we're doing today. Take what you've learned and start animating some of those things. You might include briefings with check-ins or wellness. You might actually share some of these tools that you learned today with some of your peers or even some of your artists and crew coming into the environment. Model vulnerability like Tara did at the beginning, sharing your own challenges and coping strategies. so that people do feel that in fact it's a safe place to put up their hand and let you know that they're struggling or there's another resource that needs to be there. Because as we've talked about, this environment is already super dynamic, super fast paced, changes on a dime, zero wiggle room in terms of, oh yeah, we've got a bench of 20 other people. And so remember that performance curve, we need to make sure that we mitigate the cliff. And so having open conversation and improving our literacy and building in some of these tools is critical to that. Ensure transparent, clear, and consistent communication. Part of that is learning how to actually communicate effectively. I think we take it for granted that we're all great communicators. P.S. We're not. To think about how can I ensure we're providing clear schedules, expectations, points of contact. Are we in fact also including, hey, if this happens, think about sort of almost like a fire readiness, but here are all the things that might go wrong. And how can we ensure that we're addressing any of these changes or things proactively? Create safe physical and emotional environments. Again, super dynamic, very sensory overload. So what might you, again, exploring and shifting, this is aspirational and sometimes sounds very utopian, but what might you do to explore having private, quiet spaces for rest and decompression, even if it's only for a few minutes, where you can do some of those exercises that Margaret brought to our attention earlier? Like, not everybody has the sort of the sensory capacity for just the onslaught without just a little bit of decompression. And obviously think about some of those basic human needs. So not just artists, but that everybody there can access food, water, mental health resources. Respect boundaries and autonomy. Here's one that probably sounds absurd to festival bookers. Avoid overscheduling or pressuring participation in non-performance events. But this is something that we can actually start thinking of. How can we be really thoughtful about some space, either between sessions or even thinking about that non-mandatory, participation in non-performance events? Tara and I, we met at a conference, and it was amazing. And it was literally like just chalk or fall. And sometimes you literally just need I need half an hour to not talk to anybody. I need half an hour to cover my eyes and cover my ears. I literally need to stop sensories, from coming in. Certainly a lot of this comes down to, literacy. So what is it that we're trying to do, and the investment in time in terms of training and skill development. There should be somebody who has either a mental health first aid or the program that we have, which is music industry specified mental health primer. So people actually feel more comfortable in recognizing signs and symptoms of psychological distress or burnout, and that they can actually provide some support to individuals. And then, engage the people who are coming into your festival ecosystem in co-creating some of these opportunities. So, feedback before, during, and after have some sort of communication and feedback mechanism. Something that we recommend that we have available on our research is to include some language in the riders around, a mental health rider. So again, in the interest of time, if that's something that's interesting to you, I would, check it out. It's downloadable, it's editable, very aspirational, very utopian. Most people look at it and go, yeah, that's not going to happen. But even if you took 40% and improved the work environment, that would be better than not improving it. And like Theresa was saying, we kind of often assume, well, that's just the way it is and we can't do anything about it. But let's at least start thinking about ways that we could put some of these very practical, tactical ploys in place. And then some other examples. like super simple, and I just threw a bunch of these things, you know, posters, whether it's in green rooms or buses, production, crisis hotlines, breathing techniques. Like that'd be so cool to take what you've learned here today and think, how can we make, I don't know if our people still do posters, but you know, it sounds like, so we should be able to see these things, some breathing techniques, stress tips, you know, the mental health continuum. I just start thinking about what you've learned and talked about here today, and how might that become a visible, tangible tool in the festival ecosystem. And as I mentioned, we talked a little bit earlier about some of the risk factors for suboptimal health. And this is often where we only talk is about risk factors, but we don't talk about protective factors. And so I think what we've talked about a lot today for the last 90 minutes really is about how do we learn to practically apply some protective factors for our overall health and particularly our mental health. And then this came up also, you know, just focusing on what can we control, what can't we control. And Tara and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago as well, is keeping in mind that there's sort of two, you know, mindsets and ways of looking at this, which is, you know, that I actually do have some agency, some self-determination, some say in what happens despite what might be going on outside me, versus what's going on outside me really does drive the bus, as Tara said. Like I'm really taking on all of that water. And even, you know, being committed to checking in with awareness on how you're feeling about your own sense of agency and power and control, and starting to integrate those conversations could be quite meaningful in your ability to take what we talked about today and all the amazing tips and tools that were shared and actually apply them in your place of work. So I wanted to honor the time. So boom, we did it. We at lightning speed. Are there any questions or comments, areas of confusion that you'd like to posit before we wrap up?
As we're just waiting to see if there's hands, thank you so much. And just to let everybody know that all these resources will be on our resource hub too, and on our website, so you can log into your member portal. They'll be there, and we're going to post in the forum as well to hopefully encourage more conversation around this topic, like Catherine is saying, and Margaret's been encouraging, and Theresa too, to, you know, to normalize this so that we're having regular conversations. So we will communicate the contact information for all three of our guests and the resources that they've provided. Thank you so much for being here with us on our industry call. And we are in the height of our festival season, heading into it. So hopefully you can take these tools and put them in your back pocket. Know that you're supported, and we're here for you to reach out for resources at any time. Thank you again, Catherine Harrison, Theresa Smith, and Margaret Dupee for being here with us today. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.